They say if you don't like the conversation, change it. I think my application is hopefully a clear message that we're in this club because we've had to be. Growing is hard. It's scary as hell. And when you're in a relationship, it sometimes can feel even harder because you're afraid of losing one another in the process. That fear, the fear of outgrowing one another, can get in the way. This fear often shows up as defensiveness. And defensiveness is tricky. It sneaks into so many moments. It's why I've had to bring accountability, not blame, to many of my conversations since the dinner. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're all connected, whether we want to be or not. But we can't keep living like we're in the capital from the Hunger Games, only looking out for ourselves. Our day-to-day actions impact all of us as a whole. And I want to talk a little bit about how maybe we can start to look out for each other. But in order to do that, I've learned that I have to go back to the beginning. I've had to understand why I feel a certain way, why I get so defensive. I've had to dig into why we keep finding ourselves in arguments with friends, arguments in interracial relationships, or even arguments within our own communities. Like, what is this like ragey defensiveness, and what do we do about it? How do we keep it in check? So defensiveness, I think, is something that maybe we can all connect with. I've had to sit with it and figure out which relationships are worth going back to repair. And while I've been trying to learn why things went wrong, I've been uncovering this deeper layer, I guess an understanding of things like what is causing these dynamics in my relationships with women, but particularly with white women. And as I've been looking into sort of these dinners and these arguments that I've been sharing that I've found myself in, I'm finding out what's mine to own, what's not, and how do we not have these moving forward? We got to be better than that. And so things like white feminism, sisterhood, all of these are part of the dynamics that I think we don't really realize, these dynamics between two women, and especially women of color and a white woman. At the heart of it, I just want to learn how to avoid ending up in conversations where there's just literally no coming back from. I think we've all been there, and we've all had a role in one of those kind of moments, and it's not a great feeling. We're not coming out of it better. It's never great when you're coming out of something worse. So that's where I want to start today. Welcome to Middle Fingers Up. This is segment 2 of 5 of my Angry Brown Girl Club application. First, a quick moment to reflect on segment 1. I'm curious what everyone thought about it. What did you think? What resonated with you? What maybe got you defensive? What sort of sense are you making out of it? Please let us know. For me, this reflection is a kind of like a self-feedback. To have a conversation like this, I need your feedback too. How did you fit into, how are you fitting into these themes, these conversations around locking? Tell us sort of your role, your part. We want to know what is on your mind. What do you hope we can do to continue building this community that we've started? Because here's the thing in all of this, what matters, in my opinion, is that we're all bringing our own experiences to this big ass table. And these experiences shape how we show up in the world and how we interpret each other's actions. So if I'm sitting at this big ass table with my experiences and you are with yours and the person next to you, there's a lot of life experiences. So sometimes it feels like we're sending and receiving mixed messages. For example, conversations like what we're talking about today might be celebrated, but then also by some might be dismissed. Why? Well, because our lived experiences shape our fears, our biases, and our defenses. So I want to say, like, let's not forget, we are building on the shoulders of our ancestors. And one non-negotiable for me is that we don't tear each other down while we're trying to build on the shoulders of our ancestors. I know that in our communities, there's a lot of frustration, there's some embarrassment, a lot of internalized shame, and some would say we're only as strong as our weakest link, and who decides who that is? Could be me. I just think that we really have to look at how to do our growing and our learning, but also without tearing each other down. And, that non-negotiable, if we're really coming from the same race, I'm really hoping that we can understand how important it is to grow and learn and heal together. We've been pitted against each other a lot, and I see that a lot. We all see a lot in our day-to-day, and I'm wondering if we all committed to our own actions in the day-to-day and how to be better servers of our community than, letting it crumble. If segment 1 was my application to the Angry Brown Girl Club, then segment 2 would be the review process of my application. Speaking of review, I have this internal review committee in my head with all these sorts of voices. I've been doing a lot of reviewing of segment 1. I have, voice number 1 in my head that's, oh my gosh, has she gone too far? What is going on with her? What are the auntie, what are the family community going to think? Voice 2 is well, she's not going far enough. What are the women that I'm looking up to, the activists, the ones that are really doing so much work every day, the real brown women, the real women of color in our lives every day that are having hard conversations in the workplaces and all that. What if they're what is this chick doing? She's not doing enough. This is not what we want her to do. We need something else from her. And then there's this third voice that's, what will the white people think? Am I just giving them a good reason to be called that angry brown girl? And then in somewhere all of that, of course, it's where do I fit in all this? So there's a lot of reviewing going on in my mind. Let's talk about defensiveness. I want to bring in something that Ruby Hamad emphasizes in White Tears, Brown Scars. So women of color, she would say, often are labeled as angry or difficult just for asserting themselves just for asserting themselves. Sound familiar? This is where the angry brown girl label comes in and why it's so effective as this weapon against us. And I've been thinking about that. Clearly, thinking about a lot of things. And when I say it, and I've been thinking about this, how did we get here? Kind of important to figure out if we want to know where we're going. And so the first time I realized I was part of the Angry Brown Girl Club, or maybe that I belong there, was at the dinner. And I talk a lot about this dinner in previous episodes, segment 1. That dinner was the best learning experience on so many levels. So I'll continue to use it as an example. So really not much into the racist conversation of what is race? So it was what is racism and who even started it anyway. So as I'm about to respond and responding really quick into me just even saying very little, I got from across the table from my friend, why are you so angry? Why are you scoffing? I think first it was, why are you scoffing? Then it was like, why are you angry? And then it was, why are you attacking us? I don't know if I need to say this, and I probably shouldn't even have to, but I'm going to justify it. But like, I really wasn't attacking them. I'm going to be honest. Some of you know me really well and you're like, yeah, right. But like, seriously, I wasn't. But like, that's the thing, right? About defensiveness. It derails a conversation. Suddenly it's not about the topic. It's about her feelings. So not too long after, a couple months after that, I bumped into that friend and her daughter, and we had zero communication after that. And I'm going to just tell you, like, here's what I think about that. We're talking about accountability here. And I was very, like, I thought about, should I be the one to reach out or not? And I really don't think it was mine to reach out after that dinner, because we left with very different values. We didn't just have like a little argument about, oh, the sky is blue. No, it's not. Like, literally saying to me, what is racism? And I could give you details about more of that. And so maybe they needed some time to think. And so I gave them that opportunity, as well as like, you do you. They can think what they want. I had to figure out like what that meant for me and what I was going to do. So I decided it's best for me to have zero communication. So we bump into the grocery store and her daughter recognized me. And so I was literally going to pretend and keep walking and not say anything. And because you can't have a conversation where the existence of racism, your color, the suffering of your ancestors, all of that, like you can't be questioned or told that didn't happen or didn't happen in that way, or really, I don't want to get into it, but essentially you can't be told all those things and then just let bygones be bygones or let things go. There is an apology or some kind of conversation that's required, and it was required by those friends. So here we are at the grocery store. Probably, you have a mother whose child is saying, how come you're not talking to Auntie Kieran? Like, what the heck? So naturally, a mom would say, yeah, hi, Kieran, how are you? And really, my response was, I'm fine, thanks. I went on with it because I really didn't have anything more to say after that. And I did see them sort of wonder, oh, like, it's not really kind or what we expected or whatever. That is when I actually realized, oh, I belong in the Angry Brown Girl Club. I want to talk a little bit about the role of white feminism. White feminism often shows up when women of color overstep the line. It's like this subtle, maybe not so subtle reminder, as I had said in segment 1, to not rock the boat. So, you stay in line, you stay quiet, you don't challenge the system. For me, it's deeply tied to the concept of defensiveness. White feminism preaches empowerment, but ignores intersectionality. And it centers white women's experiences and expects women of color to just sort of like pull themselves up. I don't know, whatever that saying is, by their bootstraps or whatever. And like really without addressing any systemic barriers, addressing anything about the patterns and the histories that have led women into this division over the years. So it's like really brushing it aside and like out of sight, out of mind, even though it's right here and happening right before you. So then I decided, maybe if we're going to do this review process, and as I'm going through this, like maybe we can at this moment just do a quick point form highlight snapshot of how white feminism even sort of started. And remember, like, this is sort of highlights and things that stood out for me. There are a lot of things that I'm respectfully like not adding in here, but no disrespect. I want to make sure that we understand we have a lot to uncover, a lot to acknowledge about history, and particularly history of women, white women, women of color. And so if you have stories or if you have something you want to add to this timeline, please send them. Let's build, let's learn, let's educate ourselves. So this is sort of a really quick snapshot. First, maybe where we can start with is slavery and white women's privilege. So during slavery, white women benefited from systemic oppression. And Ruby does a really helpful job in her book explaining how that came to be. And she notes that, white women were only second to white men when it came to societal privilege. So they're already below. And what's the thing to do about that? What ends up happening is they upheld and benefited from slavery systems while portraying themselves as virtuous and oppressed. And so that sort of like picture of painting one thing but then doing another is the often slap in the face that women of color feel in moments where we're reminded, don't rock the boat. And moving through this little snapshot of the white feminism history, we go into like 19th century suffrage movement. And so here early feminists are trying to prioritize white women's voting rights, but then they're often excluding or dismissing Black women's struggles, Indigenous women's struggles. So white feminism kind of emerges as a movement. It's this like centering whiteness, it's sidelining intersectionality, and it's like this time for women's empowerment. The whole thing was about empowerment, but it became very specific, like who we're empowering. Post-slavery, you have white women actively, there's this like whole upholding like segregation and racism while they were pushing for their own rights. And so again, there's like this whole weaponizing stereotypes of the angry Black women to essentially protect, their own societal status. And then there's like going through the mid-20th century, the sort of second wave of feminism that really stood out is, like kind of like 1960s. Sorry, I'm not saying because I don't know everything and I had to learn a lot of this and reread some of it too. So I'm not for a second sitting here trying to act all smart. I have notes that are helping me. But the second wave of feminism focused on workplace equality and women's reproductive rights. But again, ignoring systemic racism and economic disparities. And so then there's like no consideration of women of color's issues, the fact that women of color can't vote, the fact that they can't get the same jobs. And so there's all this police brutality going on, labor exploitation. And so none of that is being addressed. And like I have seen this in my own day-to-day where white friends have like been my advocates and like, helping me return those clothes after the 30-day without the receipt. Because if you want someone to run a campaign or help you see a point, there is a lot of strength that white women carry in that. It's just being used in a way that is really helping them throughout society, and yet we're continuing to allow it and not really address it. And we will continue to be angry in that angry club. So maybe now we can kind of look at modern white feminism, and a lot of this has to do with consumerism, in my opinion. So some symbolic gestures maybe we can look at. So empowerment campaigns, and they were often sort of like coming out and replacing systemic change. And intersectionality has continued to, remain to be overlooked. So then you have white feminists focusing on kind of their own individualistic narratives rather than the collective, and it becomes this inclusive action. Maybe a good example in this modern day white feminism is someone like Taylor Swift. She embodies feminism, but it again prioritizes white women's experiences and again overlooking all the systemic inequalities. And her advocacy focuses on personal empowerment and relationships, but again, neglecting the intersection of race, class, and gender. So it's not personal, it's a pattern. Like, so going back to this, Taylor's a good example of the whole consumer-driven, individualistic privilege, is that I'm caught in this every day too. And so, okay, I over time have been doing my growing and realize, okay, like Taylor Swift and I don't really have a lot in common. So that's not really someone I'm going to pursue. You do you. I think the main thing is, I think we should just be looking at how the things we are purchasing or endorsing or supporting in day to day, and like, what is the overall global impact? And I haven't been able to give up every store. There's the don't go to Starbucks, don't shop at Zara, don't shop here, don't shop there. And all of that can really be dividing again and pit us against each other. And I think we have to look out of the goodness of our heart, what is a good and right thing here to do? What is something that I can show my commitment when it comes to supporting Palestine? That's an example of a lot of our conversations around where are we going to shop? Where are we not going to shop? Who are we going to support so that we can send the message? Our little part is just one of many things that we can do along the way. But I don't want us to get caught in this war of, I can't be your friend because you drink coffee there, or you buy that. I think it's just a good door opener to have conversations about how did you come to that? Here's what I'm finding. And really, it's a commitment. So back to breaking down defensiveness. At the dinner that night, when I got hit with, why are you attacking us? It was interesting because when I had questioned, like, oh, where are you getting this thing of me attacking you from? The response back was, I never said that. That's what defensiveness looks like. It's a way to avoid accountability. And accountability, again, isn't about blame. It's just about growth, right? In conversations, we have lots of moments where we can grow and learn. It's not easy, but we can, and we've all done it. But without that mentality, we're stuck. What are the rules at the Deconstructing Karen dinners hosted by Syra Rowe and Regina Jackson? Is that participants have to leave the table to cry. Why? Because tears derail conversations. They re-centralize the person crying, and usually it's the one with more privilege. And so, like, I don't know, like imagine like what would happen if we tapped into that a little bit more and didn't let that defensiveness take center stage. I remember when I first started MFU, I went to a white friend's house and I had a brown friend with me, and we were talking about the beginning of MFU and excitement. And my white friend was expressing how bad she felt in how her people, white people, have treated my people. And she was very emotional, crying quite a bit. And during this, I was really irritated with the brown friend that I was with because she was dead silent and didn't say anything. And I thought that was like terrible. That was rude. And so I really wanted to console my friend, make sure that she was okay. And then later, my brown friend, she says to me, did you see what happened there? And I was like, yeah, rude. Like, hello, like, why are you leaving a girl crying like that? And she's like, I don't participate in conversations like that. Excuse me. I'm like, what? Well, she helped me understand that when you have a power imbalancement, so with race, when you have a white woman and a brown woman in this example, and like there's already, power imbalance. It's like a boss and an employee. And so you have the white woman and the brown woman. And when we're engaging this kind of dynamic and there's these tears, it really becomes about protecting her and really going back to the beginning of time. If you think when we go back to slavery, where there was a lot of oppression there for the white women, it shows up in these moments with these tears. And so then we don't really get past the tears. We're just wiping them and making sure you're okay. And we're not really talking about the thing that we could, which is like accountability. And also it's helpful to have a general one-to-one conversation about, there was lots of moments where my friend and I could have talked about ways that showed up in lots of stories that I have where you saw that power imbalance where she was above and I had to sit in my line. And so that would have been a really good opportunity for us to maybe start to unravel and work on that. But just not ready. We weren't there. So when we start sharing and talking about these or building some critical thinking around some of these moments or experiences that don't go well, we're trying to figure out like, how do we get here? I think we start to see, we start to learn, and we start to understand patterns. Another pattern that ties directly into the whole defensiveness and the power imbalance that can come up between white women and women of color is pet versus threat. So another concept Ruby Hamad shares in her book, White Tears, Brown Scars, she explains that as long as women of color stay in their line, be polite, smile, don't challenge authority, then we're pets. We're great. But as soon as we assert ourselves or question the status quo, then we become threats. And at that same dinner that I've been talking about, when I was told that I was scoffing, I had scoffed, and then quite quickly after that was labeled, as an attack. Why? Well, because I had crossed the line from pet to threat. And once that happens, the conversation is like dead, it's done, it's going to shift. And it's no longer, again, about the issue or that growth that we're hoping for, but it's more about managing the discomfort of the privileged party. Because now I'm like, oh, I'm not attacking you. Or some of us would be like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And so now it's becoming about that. Okay. What a review. And maybe we can end with one more thing here. Building solidarity. Another area I have been thinking a lot about is something we should talk about, this whole solidarity thing. We need to talk about what solidarity looks like. Solidarity. I've been spending a lot of time here wondering and pulling that word apart at the loss of these friendships and these not so good conversations. Like, what's my role? How do I help preserve these relationships? What can I do to be helpful here with my white friendships? And, today I'm sharing how I've been making sense of where defensiveness comes from and how it can get in the way of accountability. I'm also thinking about how it often turns into the blame game. And I've also been sitting with sort of like the dynamics we as women of color also find ourselves in, especially the ways that we have been also pitted against each other. And this reflection brought me to something I had mentioned earlier about being part of the Cool Brown Girl Club. So for years, I know I've wanted to be unique and different. I've always told you, and I liked hearing that. But I didn't know that there was this whole Cool Brown Girl Club. And I didn't know that I was like unknowingly promoting it too. The Cool Brown Girl Club is essentially when the brown girl believes she's equal to the white woman, or more accurately, she's also white. The white girl complex. So I didn't realize how deeply I actually was wrapped up in this until one day I was having a conversation with with the same brown woman from the other story. So we're both talking about another brown woman, and she's dating someone, and we're like, oh, she's dating a white guy. And so my response is, oh yeah, that makes sense. She's always so cool. She was a different brown girl. That moment wasn't when everything hit like a ton of bricks, but soon after you have conversations play in your head, and that one kept coming back. I'm like, what is going on? So I realized what I've been doing. I've been reinforcing this sort of like these divisions and hierarchies that have been harming us. And I know there are many of you out there that are also women of color in this boat. You may have referred to yourself as a coconut. You might have referred to yourself as an Oreo. You also have these origin stories about how you got to that cool, whatever woman of color race you are, club. And I think that's a good one to unlock for us too. I think when we do that, it helps us recognize how to be better to each other so that we can get to that solidarity piece. Okay, so I should also say, and I wrote this note because I wanted to add here, is like, I don't want to make any of us here feel bad. Because then nothing happens when we feel bad, right? Then we gotta like help ourselves feel better. And so maybe if we want to feel better, we can realize like none of this is personal. It is about recognizing these patterns and and how they've gotten us here, and then figuring out how to break them so we can just make real-time change. One way we can start building solidarity together is by being honest and open with each other as women of color. We can talk to each other. We can encourage, simplest thing is, way of doing that is sending feedback. You and I having those conversations together. This isn't just about telling me, oh, you're doing good. I appreciate that too. But like really what this feedback is about is helping us understand what's resonating. We're kind of forming our own stats. We're forming our own data. And so we can collect these conversations and do something with them, and not having them in isolation, but sharing them. And so we could do 100 stories for 100 women of color. And there's growth in those stories. I just think there's a lot of magic in that when us women of color can come together and find a way to uplift each other. Part of what that does for me is helps me recognize like it's not about being perfect or always getting it right, but it's about showing up. It's about learning and holding this kind of space for one another so that we can build upon those shoulders of our ancestors together. I believe that if we make this effort, we can start rewriting some of these narratives and some of these conversations. And maybe when we drive home in our cars and, there's these other two generations, a parent and their child, we can do some barrier breaking and have some conversations about what we missed and our own accountability and what we want to do different and better with the next generation. Because here's the thing, we're not going to heal in isolation. So as you review this segment, let me leave you with a question. What role does defensiveness play in your life? And how does it show up in your relationships, your conversations, and your own sense of accountability? This is episode 111. Oh, make a wish. Segment 2 of 5. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay angry.